The day I got promoted should have felt like the beginning of a new chapter, and in some ways it was, just not the chapter I imagined. We were at the restaurant James picked, a little too expensive for someone always worried about bills. I thought he was proud of me, but the way his eyes lingered on Rebecca, the new legal associate, made my stomach twist. She laughed a little too hard at his jokes, and he barely looked at me all night. I didn't cry then, but I felt it. It was subtle at first, like a whisper you're not sure you heard, a shift in his tone, the way he pulled away when I reached for his hand. He used to text me sweet things in the middle of the day. Suddenly, nothing, just silence. He'd come home later, smelling like hotel soap. I told myself I was imagining it, but deep down, I knew. This wasn't about insecurity, it was intuition, and it was screaming at me. Rebecca wasn't even my friend, but we'd worked together enough for me to see the act. She was always just a little too polished, a little too rehearsed, and James, he was her favorite audience. I watched her flip her hair and lower her voice when he entered the room. I told myself it was harmless, but the pit in my stomach kept growing. Something was off. I could feel the betrayal blooming quietly. When you've loved someone for years, denial can be a soft place to land. I wanted to believe I was wrong, that maybe work was just stressful, that maybe we were in a slump. But his absence wasn't just physical, it was emotional. I felt like a ghost in my own home. I'd make dinner, wait for him to show, and end up eating alone. My silence was my answer. He didn't even ask if I was okay. One night, I walked in on them laughing in the break room. Nothing dramatic, just too intimate. His hand brushed hers. She didn't flinch. He didn't apologize. They saw me, and for a split second I saw guilt flash across his face. Then it was gone, replaced by indifference. That moment changed everything. I smiled, but inside, something cracked open. The truth came out in that silence. That night, I sat in bed while he showered, staring at the ceiling. I wasn't crying. Not yet. I was calculating. I had stories of betrayal from friends, from books, but nothing prepares you for living one. And yet, part of me was calm, detached, like I'd finally stopped begging for scraps of affection. I was nothing to him. That realization burned, but it also woke me up. It's funny how your body knows before your mind accepts it. I started noticing patterns. How often he mentioned Rebecca, how often he didn't mention me. His compliments felt rehearsed, transactional. He thought I would stay, like I always had, like I always forgave. But I was already planning my exit. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just observed. And each moment added to my quiet war chest of truth. He broke me first. That's something people overlook in these stories. They see the woman rise, fight back, but forget the part where she shattered quietly for months. I cried in silence when he fell asleep beside me, turning his back. I cried into pillows, not wanting to wake him, and still, he never noticed. Or maybe he did, and just didn't care. Either way, something in me shifted for good. I started documenting little things. The dates he claimed to work late, the times he didn't answer. I wasn't doing it out of spite. I was building clarity. If I was going to burn this bridge, I wanted to do it with receipts. I found the messages one night when he forgot to log out of his laptop. Flirty, suggestive, unapologetic. My hands shook, but I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I smiled, just like I did at that dinner, just like I would at the gala. He thought I'd break down. He thought I'd cry, scream, beg. But what he didn't know was I was already gone, and the woman I was becoming, she wasn't about to fall apart. She was about to rise, because when betrayal knocks the wind out of you, your next breath becomes a strategy. It started with his phone face down on the table, always, even during dinner. Before, he'd leave it lying around without a care. Now, it was like a vault, locked, guarded, sacred. I didn't snoop right away. I wanted to trust him, but trust without action is just denial in a pretty dress. And that dress was starting to rip at the seams. My instincts were screaming, and I could no longer ignore them. He started missing important moments. A family dinner, my presentation, even our date night. Work emergency, he'd say. Eyes on the floor. I nodded, smiled, played the understanding wife, but inside, I was unraveling. He thought I would stay no matter how invisible I became, but that assumption was his first mistake. Every missed moment was a breadcrumb, and I was following the trail in silence. One night, he came home late, smelling like a perfume I didn't own. Not too strong, but unmistakable. I asked nothing, just watched his face, how he flinched under my gaze. That's when I knew I was nothing to him, a placeholder, a background character in a life he was now living with someone else. But I didn't scream. I just smiled and said, "Dinner's in the fridge." He didn't even say thank you. Started writing everything down. The calls at odd hours, the sudden new passwords, the whispered conversations in the hallway. I turned my pain into data. It gave me control, even when my heart felt like it was collapsing. He broke me first, long before I even thought of revenge. And maybe that's what made it all so dangerous. Because broken women, they don't lash out. They calculate. The day I found the messages, I wasn't even looking. He left his laptop open, stupidly confident, like betrayal had become a routine. And there they were. Her name, her selfies, her promises. Can't wait to see you tonight. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stared. My silence was my answer. And as I closed the laptop, I whispered one thing to myself. So I showed him the proof. But not yet. I took screenshots. Every single message. I forwarded them to a hidden email, printed them, filed them, organized chaos. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was about dignity. I needed to reclaim the narrative. He thought he had power because I hadn't reacted. But what he didn't see was that every quiet smile, every calm dinner, every I love you, I still said, was a setup. He had no idea what was coming. That's the thing about men like him. They mistake grace for weakness. They confuse silence with submission. But silence can be sharp, calculated, deadly. I was already planning the day I would hand him the divorce papers, and he was planning another night with her. He never saw it coming. I watched them from afar, always close, always laughing. She touched his arm too much. He let her. Nobody believed her when she pretended it was just work, but I saw through the charade, and every time they got bolder, it made my revenge simpler, my pain sharper, and my focus clearer. I wasn't just his wife anymore. I was the woman who would end his charade with a smile. She planned it all. Rebecca, I mean, from the flirty texts to the business trips. I could see the patterns, the manipulation, but he played along willingly, so when he begged her to come, back after everything exploded, it made sense. Birds of betrayal flocked together, and when she was captured, in truth, in shame, in scandal, it wasn't me who exposed her. It was her own arrogance. And through it all, I never raised my voice. Not once. My strength came from restraint. I let the clues grow louder until they screamed on their own, until the lies folded under their own weight. And as the story unraveled, I smiled, because I knew exactly how this would end. But first, I had to set the perfect stage for the takedown that would change everything. The morning after I found the messages, I didn't cry. I brewed coffee, black, no sugar, like the clarity I suddenly felt. The silence of the house no longer felt empty. It felt like strategy. Every corner, every creak held memories of betrayal. But instead of mourning, I started planning. Because if he could orchestrate lies behind my back, then I could orchestrate truth with precision. She cried in silence, they'd say, but I was done crying. I reached out to a divorce attorney the very next day. A quiet office, a firm handshake, and a folder full of screenshots that would rewrite my entire story. I want to do this right, I told her, and she nodded, like she'd seen this fire before. We talked about prenups, assets, patterns of infidelity. I learned the law like it was armor. Every clause became a sword. He betrayed me, and now I had the tools to hold him accountable. While he slept beside me, I was printing bank statements, matching hotel receipts with business trips, flagging credit card charges I never made. Revenge isn't about rage, it's about detail, about building a truth so undeniable it suffocates the lies. I had found the messages. Now I was collecting context. If he thought I would stay after everything, he was more delusional than I gave him credit for. He kept lying, even when he didn't need to. Late meeting, client dinner, exhausted. I played along, because the longer he underestimated me, the stronger my case became. I watched him lie with the same mouth that once promised forever, and every word added another brick to the wall I was building between us, a wall he wouldn't see until it was too late. I also began journaling, not just for court, but for myself. Writing helped me untangle the betrayal from the guilt he tried to plant in me. If you'd been more affectionate, he once said, as if I was the reason he chose to cheat. That's when I realized I was deceived, but I would no longer be gaslighted. My silence wasn't weakness, it was evidence. Friends started noticing something different. You seem calm, one said. I smiled, just focusing on myself. Little did they know I was preparing for war, and in this kind of war, peace is the sharpest weapon. I didn't need to scream, I just needed to be patient, because soon the truth would come out. And when it did, I'd be the one holding the script. I backed up everything on 2 hard drives, one locked away, one hidden in plain sight. My contingency plan had contingency plans, because betrayal doesn't just come with heartbreak, it comes with backlash. And I was ready. He broke me first, but I'd rebuild myself with the pieces, stronger, wiser, and with a plan so foolproof, it would make him question everything. Rebecca kept playing her role, the charming coworker, the professional flirt. She thought she was invisible, that nobody believed her involvement, but I had her name, her face, her words. She planned it all, and now I had proof of it all. If she thought this would end with me crying in some corner, she clearly didn't know who she was messing with. Every day, I smiled a little more, not because I was healed, but because I was ready. Revenge wasn't the goal, freedom was. But if revenge tagged along for the ride, I wouldn't stop it. He never saw it coming. That's the beauty of betrayal. Those who commit it often forget the victim can become the storyteller, and I was rewriting the ending. And just like that, the pieces were falling into place. But I wasn't done. I needed the perfect opportunity to show him everything, not in anger, not in chaos, but in elegance. In front of the world he thought he controlled, because while he prepared another night with her, I was preparing the night that would change everything. The company's annual gala was always his favorite night. Black tie, open bar, endless flattery. He'd rehearse his charm like a performance, polishing his lies between champagne flutes. But this year, I had different plans. I wasn't just attending, I was setting the stage. And he, with Rebecca on his arm, had no idea the lights weren't for him anymore. He betrayed me, and I turned his spotlight into my spotlight. I wore red, not out of spite, but strategy. A bold, unmistakable red that said, "I'm still standing." The kind of color that made people look twice and whisper. The kind of color that made her feel small beside me. As I walked through the ballroom, heads turned, even his. For a moment, he looked confused, then smug. He thought I was trying to win him back. Poor man. He really thought I would stay. They kissed near the bar, right in front of me. A performative gesture, like middle schoolers trying to provoke jealousy. I didn't flinch. I smiled. That same calm smile I'd worn for weeks. My silence was my answer, because the trap was already closing. I'd scheduled emails the night before, to HR, to legal, to the board, each one with evidence, each one signed with the grace of a woman who'd had enough. The gala was buzzing, loud with small talk and fake laughter. Meanwhile, my inbox lit up quietly in my purse. Read receipts, internal replies, forwarded threads. I sipped my wine, barely touching it. Every second that passed meant another step closer to the moment. He was laughing, tossing his head back like the king of the room. Oh, he never saw it coming. Rebecca kept clinging to him like a prize. She didn't know she was part of the case. Screenshots of late-night texts, blurry hotel mirror selfies, voice notes she thought were deleted, all in the drive, all shared. She planned it all, and now it was her face on every email thread titled "Urgent Misconduct." I had waited for this night, not to expose them in anger, but with elegance, in silence. I made small talk with executives, complimented dresses, thanked the event team. No one suspected a thing. That's the power of stillness. It's disarming. He thought I would break down, that I'd cry in the bathroom, but I had already cried, alone, quietly. Now I was here for the truth to come out, and for him to realize I was nothing to him only because he was blind to my worth. As the night wound down, the whispers began. Phones buzzed, faces shifted. I watched HR exit the elevator with files in hand. Rebecca looked nervous. James's smile faltered. Something wasn't right. He could feel it. That was the moment I walked past him, dropped the envelope in his hand, and leaned in. So I showed him the proof. I whispered, and walked away. Security followed. Not me, him. They asked to speak with him in private. Rebecca tried to follow. They stopped her too. Suddenly the king and his queen weren't untouchable. They were suspects. Under review. It was poetic. The very night they thought they'd flaunt their affair, they walked right into their undoing. Stories of betrayal don't always end in screaming. Sometimes they end in silence and paperwork. I didn't watch them leave. I didn't need to. I had already seen the ending in my mind 100 times. What mattered was how I felt. Calm, whole, powerful. They wanted me to react emotionally, but this wasn't about them anymore. This was about reclaiming the narrative. She exposed him, yes, but only because I let her bury herself first. And now, it was all unraveling, and as I stepped outside into the cold night air, I knew something big had shifted. But it wasn't over. The emails were just the beginning. There was still one final blow, one that would use his own pride against him, because I wasn't just divorcing him. I was dismantling everything he built on lies. Monday morning arrived like a storm I had predicted. I sat by the window, coffee in hand, watching the clouds roll in while the real thunder echoed in inboxes across the company. HR had already responded to my files with urgency. Legal was involved. The board had been looped in, and James, well, he had no clue what was waiting for him at his desk. He betrayed me, and now he was about to learn how calculated silence can shake foundations. By 9:02 a.m., he was in a conference room surrounded by executives. Rebecca wasn't allowed in. She stood outside the glass walls, biting her nails, whispering into her phone. Inside, James sat with a folder in front of him. My folder. Every screenshot, every timestamp, every inappropriate message. I found the messages. I tracked the money, and now every thread was neatly woven into a story he couldn't deny. I knew he'd try to lie. That's what he always did: spin, distract, minimize. But there's a funny thing about facts. They don't need emotion to sting. They just are. So I showed him the proof, not with rage or desperation, but with precision. The kind of precision that comes from weeks of planning. The kind that says, this is not a reaction. This is a resolution. His voice raised behind that closed door. I could imagine the tone. Shock. Betrayal. How ironic. Confusion. He probably said I was bitter, that I was exaggerating, that I was making it all up. But the emails weren't written by me. The photos weren't taken by me. The affair wasn't mine to invent. It was his to answer for. And finally, nobody believed. Her either. Not when the receipts were that loud. When the door opened, the hallway went silent. James came out looking smaller. His tie was undone, and his face had lost all color. He didn't look at anyone. Rebecca tried to reach for his hand, but he pulled away. She cried in silence, right there in the hallway. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered. She planned it all. She smiled while I cried. She watched me unravel. Security escorted James out, quietly, but publicly. That was the company's way of saying, we don't protect cheaters who risk our reputation. HR sent a company-wide memo minutes later. Policy enforcement in progress. Leadership transition effective immediately. He never saw it coming. One moment he was the boss. The next he was a name in a footnote of a scandal. I stayed at my desk, calm, focused. Emails kept pouring in. Support, surprise, even quiet admiration from people who had also been betrayed but never spoke up. My silence was my answer, and now they heard me loud and clear. No screaming, no scenes, just strategy, truth, and consequence. Rebecca was called in next. She didn't come back out. Rumors spread quickly. She'd been let go. Something about misuse of internal systems, conflicts of interest, and violating company ethics. In other words, betrayal doesn't come without cost. She exposed him, yes, but only after I gave her the stage and let her fall through it. By noon, it was done. James was gone. Rebecca, erased. And me, I was still standing, still strong, and now officially free. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. There was still one card left to play, one hidden clause in our prenup that would turn the dagger a little deeper. James always loved control. He prided himself on being 10 steps ahead, the kind of man who thought contracts were weapons only he could wield. I still remember the day we signed the prenup, how smug he looked. He'd said it was just smart business, a way to protect both of us. But really, it was designed to protect him, or so he thought. He thought I would stay no matter what. He truly believed I was nothing to him legally or emotionally once that paper was signed, but he underestimated me. Buried in the legalese was a clause, one he had insisted on, ironically, that stated any act of infidelity that caused reputational or professional harm would render his protections void. Back then, he was so confident, saying, "It's just a formality. We're not those people." But now, that very clause was the blade I sharpened quietly in the dark. She cried in silence when she realized the fallout wasn't just emotional. It was financial, legal, total. My lawyer nearly laughed when I pointed it out. "He wrote this clause himself," she said. "He handed you your escape and your revenge on a silver platter. I was deceived, but I wasn't stupid. And when the truth came out, I made sure it came with paperwork, signatures, and consequences that would haunt him longer than any scandal. He broke me first, but now, the system he built was crumbling under his own weight. I filed the divorce officially that same week. The firm was forced to acknowledge not just the affair, but the internal policy breaches. He had used company funds to book hotels, write off dinners with Rebecca, even expense gifts he claimed were client-related. So I showed him the proof. Again, not to argue, but to finalize. His financial deceit stacked neatly beside his emotional betrayal, forming a tower of evidence no judge could ignore. The prenup clause activated like a trapdoor. Suddenly, the assets he tried to protect, gone. The accounts he thought I'd never touch, frozen. The stocks under his name, half mine now. He begged her to come back, tried to say Rebecca meant nothing, but it was too late. Nobody believed her, and nobody was about to save him. Not after the story made the rounds. The once respected executive undone by greed, arrogance, and one very smart woman. He tried to call, left voicemails pretending we could work it out like adults. But my silence was my answer. I didn't need to yell. I didn't even need to respond. Every dollar I secured, every asset I reclaimed, was a sentence in a story he never wanted told. A story of betrayal that ended with the one betrayed rising, not collapsing. People love to talk about karma like it's something that floats in the universe, waiting. But I've learned that sometimes you are the karma. Sometimes you sit at the table, smile politely, and let the documents do the talking. That was my moment. I didn't throw a fit. I didn't post on social media. I walked into court, calm, collected, and ready. And when the judge finalized everything, I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch, because the best kind of revenge isn't destruction. It's reclamation. It's rebuilding in plain sight while they fall apart off stage. He thought I would crumble, but I rose instead. And now, as I signed the final page, I felt it. Freedom, justice, peace. But I wasn't done rising, because the next chapter wasn't about him at all. It was about me, who I could become without the weight of betrayal pulling me down. The first night in my new apartment, I sat on the floor with a glass of wine, surrounded by unopened boxes and silence. But this time, the silence didn't sting. It healed. It was mine. I wasn't waiting for footsteps at the door, or pretending not to notice the scent of another woman on his shirt. I was finally alone, and at peace. After everything, he betrayed me. I was deceived. I cried in silence. I had finally found something I thought I'd lost forever. Me. The place wasn't big, but every inch of it felt like a breath of fresh air. I painted the walls, picked out each piece of furniture, and filled the space with laughter from friends who never left my side. It was simple, but it was real. No more pretending, no more walking on eggshells. The calm was so complete, it felt like rebellion. He never saw it coming, that I could be happy without him. Funny thing is, people started telling me I looked different. Lighter, they said. I guess healing has a glow of its own. Every morning I woke up a little stronger. Every night, I fell asleep knowing I no longer had to carry secrets that weren't mine. I found joy in the little things. Quiet mornings, long walks, cooking for one. And most of all, I stopped apologizing for needing space to grow. He tried to contact me. Of course he did. That's how it always goes, right? He thought I would stay. He thought the silence meant I was weak. But he was wrong. I didn't block him. I just never replied. My silence was my answer. And I knew deep down that haunted him more than any words ever could. Because now, he was the one left with regret echoing in an empty house. One day, I heard Rebecca had left him. Just walked out. No note, no warning. She planned it all, apparently. Maybe betrayal is a cycle that eats its own tail. Nobody believed her version of the story this time either. And truthfully, I didn't care. That chapter was closed. I was done being the woman they used to define themselves. I had better things to build. At work, I flourished. Promotions came, new opportunities arrived, and suddenly, I was sitting in meetings I used to only dream of. People respected me, not because of what I'd survived, but because of who I'd become in spite of it. I no longer needed to prove anything to anyone, especially not him. My power was never in revenge, it was in evolution. I started journaling again. Writing helped me make sense of everything. The stories of betrayal, the pain, the resilience. I poured it all onto paper, not to dwell, but to release. And with every page, I found a new layer of myself. The woman who had once whispered, "I was nothing to him," now roared, "I am everything to me." There were nights when the past knocked on my door, uninvited. Moments when the old pain flickered like static in my chest. But I didn't run from it. I let it sit beside me, then watched it leave, because it no longer owned me. I had built a home inside myself that no one could invade again. Not with lies, not with kisses meant to destroy me. And the peace? Oh, it was loud in its own quiet way. It filled every corner of my life with meaning. I traveled alone. I danced barefoot in my living room. I found freedom in boundaries and strength in solitude. The woman he tried to break didn't just survive. She recreated herself. And this time, she chose everything. But here's the thing about peace. It's not the end of the story. It's the foundation. And I could feel it in my bones. Something powerful was still coming. A moment, a reflection, a reckoning that would tie everything together. I stood in front of the mirror, fixing my hair before another big meeting. The reflection staring back at me wasn't the same woman I had been a year ago. She was confident, calm, and had a certain glow about her that came from something deeper than just makeup or good lighting. It was the kind of radiance that only comes from within, the kind you can't fake. I had earned this. I had earned me. As I walked into the office, I noticed how the room seemed to part for me, like they all knew. Everyone knew. There was no need for dramatic gestures or big speeches. I wasn't the victim of betrayal anymore. I was the architect of my own destiny. There was a power in simply being who you are, after all the lies, after all the deception. It was quiet, but it spoke volumes. I thought about him again, just for a second. Ethan, that man who had tried to break me, who had thought he could get away with everything. What he didn't know was that I had already moved on, long before. He realized it. I wasn't waiting for the perfect revenge. No, I was living it. My success, my peace, my happiness, that was my victory. Funny how the universe works. The more you focus on your own growth, the less room there is for anyone else's mess to ruin it. I had worked hard to get where I was, and I didn't need to scream about it from the rooftops. The universe would do the talking for me. Every promotion, every new opportunity was a testament to my strength. I had become the story they would talk about, without needing to utter a single word. And then there were the moments when I truly felt it, when I remembered where I came from. I wasn't bitter, but I was aware. Every tear I shed in silence, every time I felt betrayed, it had shaped me into the woman I had become. And now, all that pain had become my foundation. It was no longer a burden. It was the ground I stood on. You see, what they don't tell you is that revenge doesn't always have to be loud. It doesn't need to be dramatic. Sometimes, revenge is as simple as walking away, standing tall, and letting the world see that you've learned from your past. That's the kind of revenge that doesn't need anyone else's approval. It's the kind that makes them wonder why they ever doubted you in the first place. He tried to come back. Of course he did. But this time, I didn't answer his calls. I didn't even hesitate. I wasn't that woman anymore, the one who cried in silence, the one who begged for things to be different. I had moved beyond all of that. And as much as he begged, as much as he tried to find a way back into my life, I knew something he didn't. I was never going back. It was in that moment that I truly understood something. We get to define our own endings. We don't need permission. We don't need a grand gesture. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply let go. And trust me, letting go was the most freeing thing I had ever done. I had let go of him, of the lies, of the pain, and, in return, I had gained everything. People started coming to me for advice, asking how I had done it, and I'd just smile and tell them the same thing. It wasn't about him, it was about me. When you stop waiting for someone else to save you, and realize that you've always had the power, that's when the real magic happens. The universe rewards strength, and I was finally living proof of that. As I walked out of that meeting room, the sun setting behind me, I couldn't help but think, this is just the beginning. I had faced my worst fears, stared betrayal in the face, and walked away victorious. The journey wasn't over, but it was no longer defined by the pain I had once carried. It was defined by what I had built for myself.